Okay, hello everybody. This is the BCBA and LBA hours workshop. We are going to be covering a little bit of an overview as to how you guys in the program can properly log all of your BCBA and your LBA hours. So the way that this workshop is going to work is that myself and my colleague, Miss Letitia Harvey, are
Hello.
going to, hi. So we are going to take turns explaining to you how to go through this wonderful, rigorous process of you finally getting both of these amazing credentials and licenses. So let's start off with a little bit of an introduction. So that's me on the top right. My name is Andrew Ng. I am a board certified behavior analyst, and I'm also a licensed behavior analyst of New York. And I'm also an adjunct lecturer here at Queens College. I currently teach the intro to behavior analysis course, coincidentally. So a little bit about myself. I graduated from Queens College with both my undergrad and my graduate. And I completed the ABA master's program in 2018 or 2019. Time is flying by so fast, but I have been a BCBA and LBA for about a year now. And I also currently work for a private agency.
My name is Letitia. Hi, guys. I'm finishing up my last semester in the ABA program at Queens College. I worked at SIPS Club with Dr. Jones for 3 years, completing my practicum and fieldwork project. And I also work in early intervention as a head teacher's assistant.
Awesome. So the first thing that we'll go over is just kind of to break down the difference between what's the BCBA, what's the LBA. I'm sure you guys, got the general gist of what it is already by now, but this is just kind of to give you a little bit more of a, just a reminder of what we'll be talking about. So the BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst. This is a graduate level and it's a national certification that certifies the individual to practice behavior analysis as an independent practitioner. The LBA is a licensed behavior analyst. So as opposed to something that's a national thing, this is a state license. This is a state license that will allow a behavior analyst to practice within their state of residence. These requirements vary state by state. So not all of the 50 states have their each individual license requirements. New York has their own, California has their own, I believe Massachusetts has their own. So it really varies state by state. But in this workshop, we're going to be going over the New York LBA.
Okay, so first we're going to start off with the BCBA. So how do you get the BCBA in the first place? So you need to accrue 1,500 hours or 2,000 supervision hours, depending on if you are planning to finish your hours before 2022 or after January 1st, 2022. So you cannot start collecting hours until there is a signed contract between you and your supervisor. So once you sign your contract, then you can start accruing hours. And 50% of those hours must be indirect. So indirect, which will be labeled as unrestricted on the Excel sheet, are any hours in which you spend not working directly with the client, but still working on activities that pertain to the client's progress. So creating behavior plans, programs, analyzing and graphing data, consulting with and speaking to parents, having meetings with your supervisor, and research, etc. Direct, which will be labeled as restricted on the Excel file, are any hours in which you spend directly working with the client. So working on programs with the client face-to-face, things such as that. It's important to note that for accruing BCBA hours only, again, this only pertains to accruing BCBA hours. You are allowed to work with any child or learner with developmental disabilities. So you are not restricted to autism. But again, this is only for BCBA hours only.
Yeah, that point will come clear as we talk about the LBA
Mhm.
towards the end of this presentation.
Right.
We're ready for going to the next slide?
Mhm.
Okay.
So pictured is a chart of supervision requirements before 2022. So you would need a total of 1,500 hours, which you can accrue in 3 different fieldwork types: supervised independent fieldwork, practicum, or intensive practicum. However, those in the program accruing hours from a fellowship site will always log their hours as supervised independent fieldwork. So focus mainly on the first category. Next slide. So pictured is a supervision requirements chart for January 2022. So those applying for BCBA certification on or after January 1st, 2022 have different requirements that need to be met. So the most prominent change in requirements are the number of hours needed to obtain. So instead of 1,500 hours in total, you would now need to accrue 2,000 hours. You could accrue these hours in a single category, so either under supervised field work or under concentrated supervised field work, or you can combine the two. The only difference between the 2 fieldwork types listed is that concentrated supervised fieldwork provides a pathway for individuals to complete their fieldwork in fewer hours, but with more supervision versus supervised fieldwork. So if you look down at supervision hours per supervisory period, under supervised fieldwork, you would need 5% of those hours to be supervised, but under concentrated supervised fieldwork, you would need 10% of those hours to be supervised. And on the next slide is just the fieldwork criteria chart, just a little bit of what I mentioned before, but in a more clearer picture. So again, you could accrue 1,500 hours under the concentrated supervised fieldwork type, but just be sure that you have 6 contexts rather than 4, and you are obtaining 10% of your supervised hours rather than 5%. So just be on top of that if you choose to do less hours. Next slide. So logging like on the Excel spreadsheet. So be sure to fill out the settings and supervisors tab with your supervisor's information, such as the BACB account ID number, the setting in where you are accruing your hours, etc. In the fieldwork log tab, which is pictured on the bottom, you will log the hours accrued as either restricted, direct, or unrestricted, indirect. So after filling out the information needed in the fieldwork log tab, the next tab would be data analysis. And this tab would sum up all of your hours automatically for each month. This way you will be able to see very clearly how many restricted and unrestricted hours you've accrued so far in the month and how many more you need. So if you do see, well, you will see letters or codes that pop up in the data analysis tab. And these codes are basically, they are for different requirements. So, and you'll see the explanation of these codes and what they mean in the audit categories tab. So until you reach your 1,500 or 2,000 requirement, each month you will see the letters G and H show up. However, once you finish with the required number of hours, those letters will disappear and you'll know that you've reached your total number of hours. At the end of accruing all of your hours, you should not see any codes whatsoever. So the monthly and final timesheets. So there are monthly logs that you would need to go over with and have signed by your supervisor and yourself. So to fill out the form, you will use the sum from the data analysis tab on the Excel sheet for that month. After going over and signing the monthly sheet, be sure to make a copy for your files and to keep them with your contract. At the end of accruing your hours, you will need a final supervision form that lists the complete total number of hours. And when you are all done completing your hours, going over them with your supervisor. You will send your contracts, only your contract and your final form to the board. But do hold on to the Excel sheet and monthly forms just in case of auditing. So here is a little comprehension flow chart for sitting and taking the exam. So first, the BACB will request documentation, so your final forms and your contract. The trainee or supervisor will submit these documentations to the board, and they will review the documentation, and they will provide feedback. So the board will then contact you and let you know of approval. So if you can take the exam or if you're missing any hours and need to backtrack.
Yeah, so during the feedback portion, the BACB does conduct an audit that occurs on a rolling basis. So in the event of an audit, there's additional process that if you guys want to do some more research about that, it is on their website. But just basically in a nutshell, that is when you would have to supply them with additional documentation, such as your lovely tracker that is presented just on how Letitia was explaining on this slide. So the BCBA exam is structured with 150 questions. They go over several areas of content stemming from basic behavior analytics skills, which include things like measurement, experimental design, so on and so forth. And there's also a big chunk of questions that are around client-centered responsibilities. So things about what is the problem that this client is having? How are you going to fix it? How are you going to measure that behavior? How are you going to assess behavior change? All of these things that, make sure that the BCBA is competent enough in being being a very good behavior analyst, So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience taking the exam. So I did pass on my first try. I studied about maybe 3 months before the exam, and I thought it was pretty challenging, to say the least. It was very long. They give you, I believe, 4 hours to take the exam, and I used every single minute of my time to make sure everything was completed and answered to the best of my abilities. And yeah, it was definitely one of the most challenging exams that I have ever taken in my life. But at the time when I took this exam, there wasn't, you didn't know whether you passed or not right away. So the worst part was that I had to wait about a month and a half to tell me whether or not I passed. But as of a few months ago, they changed it. So now you guys who will be taking the test, you will know on the spot whether or not you passed or not, which I feel will lessen your anxiety, which I'm definitely a little bit jealous of, because I was definitely feeling like this guy at the top right during that whole waiting period. But yeah, I mean, below here are some study guides that I used during the test not during the test, before taking the test, to make sure that I was well prepared. Again, I studied maybe about like 3 months before the test, but just like how I would tell my students, each student's studying abilities are different from the next. Do whatever you feel is right for you in terms of how well you feel prepared, and then just go from there. What I will say is that, you should be testing your competency in how well you know the material before you actually start studying. And the way to do that is, of course, with just testing. So take a bunch of practice exams and see how well you do. Make sure you're good at time management and things like that. Behavior analysts are good at, really breaking apart those behaviors and figuring out like, okay, if I'm a test taker, how can I improve upon those things? You know, like maybe it's, you know, working on answering questions more quickly, you know, improving your time management and things like that. So anyway, I just thought it would be nice if I can attach some study materials that I used. I used this really big book that was almost like a textbook, to be honest, about like 500 pages or so. It's called Pass the Big ABA Exam, and it was excellent. I have to say that really, really helped me. It's a great book. It's, I don't remember the price, but I dedicate, you know, expect to shell out at least $100 for it. But I'm telling you, it's definitely worth it. It breaks down all the concepts that you have learned through school in very easy language, and there's lots of practice questions to make sure that you're retaining it as well. And also there are a lot of phone apps out there actually that have a lot of ABA practice questions out there. And one of them, my favorite, is ABA Wizard, in which that it'll give you questions about all of these content areas and just give you lots of questions to practice with. And that's the same thing for ABA test prep as well. They're just both really great apps that will just give you a lot of practice questions. And I think learning with practice questions is probably the best way to pass this exam, to be honest. Like you can study the whole Cooper book, sure, you know, learn all the terminology like the back of your hand. But when at the end of the day, when you're a behavior analyst, you know, applied is in the word for ABA, right? Applied behavior analysis. We want to make sure that we're applying all of our concepts and all of our knowledge, textbook knowledge, to the real world situations, because that's what your job is going to be. Okay.
Mhm.
So now we're going to shift gears, in which I'll take the floor and I'm going to be explaining about how you guys can get the LBA. Again, this is specific to just New York. So the LBA is, again, it's a state licensure required for behavior analysts to practice in New York. So that includes New York State and New York City. So similarly to the BACB's requirement of 1,500 hours, the LBA has the same requirement in terms of how many experience hours you need. I have not heard of any anticipations to increase the amount of experience hours like how the BACB is doing in 2022. But at this point in time, 1,500 hours is what they are requiring. However, there is a catch-all for all these 1,500 hours that you are doing. So one is that you can only accrue these hours from university-approved sites. So this means that you are collecting hours that Queens College has, you know, approved that, hey, this is a fieldwork site that we have looked through. We have made sure that it's good for our students to learn from. They can count their hours towards the LBA for working at this site. So places like SIBS Club, places like BIPS, I believe, right? Behavior Interventions, Psychological Services, I believe, is the abbreviation. At least when I was still in school.
Yeah, it is still.
Yeah, there's Elijah, which is a school out in Long Island. There's a whole, I believe there's a whole list online on the Queens College's ABA Masters website that has a whole list of the fellowship sites that, you know, you can work at for you to accumulate your LBA hours at. So I would just check with your professor or your supervisor from Queens College to make sure, to direct you to that website. For the LBA, there's no standardized log sheet as opposed to that Excel tracker that the BACB requires. For the LBA, they haven't really specified how you're, logging everything. Because the thing is that they are they do not, I can't, you can't take my words. Don't take, what's the word? They might have an audit process, right? In which that in the event that they ask you for all of your hours, you have to show evidence that you have that. So you're just making sure basically that you are logging all of your hours that you do on a daily basis on some type of sheet, whether it's another type of Excel sheet that's very similarly to the BACBs. You can log things on that, right? But not using the same tracker, but just like something that looks similarly to it. There's some students that make up their own, which they work out with their supervisor. So anyway, what I'm going along with this, where I'm getting at with this is that, do sit down with your supervisor and, mention that you're working towards the LBA and you just want to work out some type of standardized system so that you are, tracking all of your hours correctly. Supervision for the LBA has to occur at least once per week. So as opposed to the BACB where supervision has to just occur for a percentage of the whole month period and in total, the LBA requires for applicants to have supervision once per week. For the LBA, you can only accrue hours while still enrolled in a university-approved program. So Queens College's ABA program is an approved university by the state. So this is just to make sure that you guys know that you are accumulating hours from an approved university. There are some out there that are not, things that are online universities. Some of those are not state approved. So you just have to make sure, like in the event, like if you know a friend or someone else that is not in Queens College, they have to make sure that they are getting their hours from a state approved college. And lastly, for you to accumulate your LBA hours, you have to be supervised by a person that has an LBA from New York. So the autism exam. The autism exam is required to be taken for receiving LBA New York status. But the thing is that the autism exam is only eligible for you to take after you have passed the BCBA exam. You can do the reverse, in which that you can take the LBA exam and then just apply for BCBA licensure, BCBA certification, sorry. But I don't recommend that. Whoops. Because it will just take a very, very long time, and that will become prevalent in my, towards the end of this lecture. But anyway, this is just a recommendation that I believe 99% of students do anyway, is that do take the BCBA exam first. There is an LBA exam, which is essentially the same structure as the BCBA exam, but it's just delivered by the state. But really the only difference is that it's just going to take, the process is going to take way much longer. For the autism exam, for the whole LBA licensure, there is a $300 application fee. And that is the fee that will permit you to take this exam. There is no action required. New York State will inform the applicant when exam eligibility is active. So as soon as you pass the BCBA exam, what the BACB will do is that they'll notify your state and they will basically allow you permission to apply to take this test. And what the autism exam is actually not all that bad at all. It's only 30 questions. It basically assesses to make sure that a behavior analyst is competent enough to know how to treat those with autism spectrum disorders. Because as we know, behavior analysts is quite a global thing. We don't only work with individuals with I mean, all around the globe, we don't only focus on working with people with autism. We want to make sure that at least in New York, we are recognizing that this behavior analyst is using this as a tool as a therapeutic tool to help out these individuals with this disorder. So a little bit about my experience on the test. It was, again, not all that bad. It was only 30 questions. I finished it in less than an hour. I believe, I don't know about this day and age with, the pandemic going on, if you have to go in person to take this test. But at least for my experience, you do have to make an appointment with Pearson still and just go into a testing site and take it. But yeah, again, it was pretty easy, I have to say. If you have been working with kids for, for quite some time and you do well on the BCBA exam, this autism exam should not be anything challenging for you. I would not worry about it. The BCBA exam is the biggie. So we're going to sum up all of the application forms that you need in order for you to apply for the LBA. So the first form that you'll do is the general LBA application. And that's when you'll pay your $300 fee. And you're basically just submitting all of your basic and demographic information. So you can pay that fee. You can complete Form 1 and pay that fee at really any time after you graduate, I believe. There's really no rush to do it, because what the state is going to wait for is your certification of professional education and your reports of professional experience. So those are your hours. Because a lot of other students have asked me, like, oh, like if I submit Form 1, will that expedite my process? I don't think it does. Because like I said, they'll hold on to your application, but they can't proceed until they get evidence that you've went to an approved university. They have your official transcript, and so on and so forth. So anyway, in Form 2, like I had just mentioned, this is where you'll have your official transcript ready to go and send out. But you have to make an appointment with the registrar's office for this, because they'll be the ones that they have to stamp off on it and sign it and whatever, coming directly from their end. This is not something that you do. On Form 3, I don't think that a lot of you will have this, but if you have another professional license, such as if you're a speech pathologist or an occupational therapist or a social worker or a counselor, this is when you'll attach all of your other forms of licensure to the state. Form 4 is your report of professional experience, which is probably the most important form of all of them, which is where you'll document all of your hours that you have done. It's got a similar structure to the BACB's final form, in which they'll ask you, okay, what's the total amount of hours that you did during your whole time? How many of those hours were supervised? And there'll be a checkbox to ask, like, was the supervisor there to supervise you every single week? And so on and so forth. So this is a form that you have to definitely set an appointment with your supervisor to sit down and make sure that everything looks correct. Because if one thing is wrong, they will send it back. And the New York State Education Department is very, very slow. And I'm not even doing that to be funny or anything, but it is very much a process to hear back from these people. So make sure that you do fill out everything correctly, triple check it, quadruple check it. And Form 5 is the application for a limited permit. And what the limited permit is that you need to apply for this if you have graduated, suppose, from the program, and you're no longer taking classes. If you're no longer a student, you can't accrue hours towards the LBA. It's just a rule. So what you have to do is that if you anticipate that you're not going to get enough hours after you graduate, immediately apply for this limited permit. So it's a $70 fee that you do have to pay, and it lasts for a year. And basically it allows you to, collect more hours when you're no longer under a university. And it's totally okay to do that, but it's going to take some time. Again, it is a permit that they are giving you, and they do have to sign off on it. And that is a process. It can take several months to get this permit. So that's why we are going to encourage you to, make sure you are completing all of your hours within that 2-year graduation period. Unless if you're taking your time through the program and you're stretching out to 3 years, that still counts. You are still be able to collect your hours, just at least you are still enrolled in a program. Right? Did I miss anything, Tish, with that?
No, sounded great.
Okay. So again, as you guys have gotten hinted upon, getting my LBA and my experience with it was much like this not young guy. I was gonna say like young man. It's like he's clearly not young. Like this guy over here. I waited a long time to get my LBA. My process was I graduated. I immediately sent in Form 1 so I can get something started at least. And then I applied for the BCBA exam, and they approved my coursework and all of my hours and whatnot. So they permitted me to take the BCBA exam. I scheduled it maybe about like 3 months from the date that I got that email. I took the test. The BCBA exam we're talking about, I had to wait about a month almost to hear back from the results, because remember at this time they didn't have immediate results.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally heard I passed, threw a big party for myself. After the party ended, I heard back from the state actually not too long after, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks, I believe, from the state saying that, hey, congrats on passing the BCBA. You can take the autism exam that will give you your state licensure. So that's when I applied for taking the autism exam. I think I took it about maybe 2-3 weeks after I got that email, just so I can make sure I can familiarize myself with the topics and whatnot. I took it, and I don't remember for the autism exam if it gives you immediate results or not.
I'm not sure about that one.
I don't think I did. I heard back maybe, I think I heard back maybe like a few weeks after. So that was like another waiting period that I had to go through, and feeling like this guy yet again. And even though, I finally got that email saying that congratulations, you passed the autism exam, you are going to get your LBA within the next few weeks. The few weeks is a lie. It was months. I waited about, I think, this is actually on the quick end of things. I think I waited maybe 3.5 months to finally get my LBA, and they assigned me with a number. They sent me my certificate. So I don't know what their speed is at the moment with the whole pandemic, but at least in my experience, for waiting for that LBA was such a nightmare. It was me, calling the office at least once a week, like, hey, where's my, did you submit my application yet? Like, did I get my LBA yet? And so on and so forth. And they're like, oh, like they'll update their website saying the stack, they'll look at on their website, they'll update that the applicants that they are looking through within a time frame, right? So I think at the moment they're looking through applicants for the end of October, I think.
Mhm.
So they're they're slowly catching up, I feel, but they're not as fast as you will expect, as I guess what I'm going to say here. So it's all really just, there is going to be a waiting game for you guys, unfortunately. But the BCBA, they work very fast. You can get your BCBA pretty quickly, but you can't work unless if you have both the BCBA and the LBA. So you might not be able to work in many places in New York until you have that LBA, unfortunately. So yeah, that's just a little bit more about my experience. It was definitely worth it in the end. I love my job. I love working as a behavior analyst now. And, definitely having the LBA opens up a whole lot of opportunities in which you want to work also. But it's just something to consider when you are going through this process. It can take some time. But be persistent, be patient. It'll all be worth it. So this was kind of what I had just explained about how I got to this point where I am today. So I'll just read over it one more time. So this is my recommended pathway that I want you guys to probably follow. So the first step is that you should, collect all of your 1,500 hours for your BCBA and your LBA during your program. The thing is with the LBA, you can, if you're working at, let's suppose SIBS Club. SIBS Club is an approved fellowship site. You can count both of your hours towards both of these certificates and licenses, right? So suppose if you work 10 hours a week with this one kid at SIBS Club, just for example, I can count 10 of those hours towards the BCBA, and I can count 10 of those hours towards the LBA. Just making sure, though, that the supervisor is there at least once per week. And if you're meeting the requirements on both ends, you can get both of these things done. Don't think that you have to get 3,000 hours done, because they're two separate things. Okay. After you have collected all of your hours, you just go through graduation, get your master's degree. After that, you have to submit all of your forms to apply for the LBA, and then also apply for the BCBA at the same time. And after you've submitted all your forms, they say, okay, cool, you can take the exam. So take the exam, pass the exam. And then after you pass the BCBA exam, then you'll hear back, like I said, from the state, and they'll say, like, okay, you take the autism exam, pass it as well. And then you just have to wait a little bit for you to get your LBA to come through. But then again, you'll finally be done, and you can call yourself and add a bunch of extra letters to the end of your name, a BCBA and an LBA-NY.
Looks great.
So yeah, and then these are just some sources that I wanted to supply all of you with some information as to how you can, refer to the BCBA handbook to make sure that you are following. There's of course, I guess, so much more information that we did not touch upon. So do make sure that you read through it in terms of how to appropriately accumulate your hours. In 2022, they're changing the eligibility requirements slightly, as Tish mentioned. So just take a look at that. And again, this is all on the website, so you can probably find it anywhere. But the BCBA timesheets, the monthlies and the finals, I've attached over here. And your LBA forms are going to be located at this website as well. So yeah, all in all, thank you for watching this presentation. Best of luck to all of you. We have inserted our email addresses here if you ever have any questions about anything that we have presented.
Mhm.
And best of luck again.
Thank you so much. And yes, good luck, as Andrew said. I know all of you guys are going to do great. You have a great support system behind you. Definitely, QC, the ABA program was definitely supportive. And remember that you guys are going to be one big family. So reach out to each other, help each other, and you'll do great.
Yeah, I definitely want to piggyback off of what Tish just said about, Queens College being a really great experience. With growing through the master's program, they definitely will prepare you very well for what's set ahead of you. So,
Yeah. Thanks again,
all right.
guys.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.